everybody. My name is Sierra. I'm one of the community health dietitians here, and I want to thank you all for tuning in today for the Go Red event. I'm going to be providing a little nutrition education and a cooking demo, and today I'm going to be cooking spaghetti squash with a turkey and tomato sauce. So let me first start off by heating up my pan. I have a pan here with a little canola oil. So canola oil is one of our heart healthy oils. It has certain types of fats that are really good for our heart. So not all fats are the same. Certain fats like saturated fats are going to put us at higher risk for heart disease. Other fats like omega-3 fatty acids, polyunsaturated fats like in canola oil, those are going to reduce our risk of cardiovascular disease. And saturated fat is mostly found from animal products. So beef, the fat from like beef. It can also be found in things like coconut oil. So that's why we want to try and reduce how much saturated fat we eat and how much coconut oil or beef or butter we eat because those foods have a lot of saturated fat. So I got my pan, the oil heating here. I'm going to first show you guys how to cook the spaghetti squash. So I got a couple of spaghetti squashes here. They're kind of just like a nice round oval yellow squash. What's cool about them though is when you cook them, you can kind of scrape out the flesh, the inside, and it's like spaghetti noodles. To first cook our spaghetti squash, we're just going to cut it right in half. And so these are pretty tough squash, so you want to make sure that you have a very sharp knife, first of all. And another tip that can help with cutting the spaghetti squash in half is you can microwave it first, and microwaving it kind of loosens it up a little bit. I did not microwave mine, so we'll see if I can get it. Alright, and then once you get yours cut in half, you're going to want to go ahead and start scooping out the seeds. So this might be a fun job if you have some kiddos at home. It's kind of fun it's like carving pumpkins. Scoop all the gooey flesh and seeds out. And you can keep the seeds if you want. You can roast them in the oven, kind of like pumpkin seeds, so you can do that with other squash seeds as well. And then once we get the seeds out, we are going to just put them in a baking dish here. So I have a baking dish set up already over here. It has about 1 inch of water in it. So I'm just going to put the spaghetti squash in there face down in the water. And then I'm just going to pop it in the oven. So the oven is set to 400 degrees. And it's going to cook for about 50-55 minutes. So I'm going to set a timer for that so I don't forget. Okay, so I got my squash in the oven. I already cooked one ahead of time. And so I scraped out the squash already, and you can see this one is just like the empty skin, the empty shell. And we're going to use those, so we're not going to toss them. But you can see this other one I'm just shredding right now. And so once your spaghetti squash is cooked, you are just going to scrape all the inside out, and you're just going to set it in a bowl to the side because we're going to mix it with the pasta sauce. But spaghetti squash is great because it's an excellent source of vitamin A. Vitamin A is what keeps our eyes and our skin healthy and our immune system strong, as well as vitamin C. Vitamin C does that as well. Vitamin C helps our wounds heal. And it's also a great source of fiber. Fiber is found naturally in a lot of fruits and vegetables. And fiber is a nutrient that can help lower our cholesterol. So that's why it's so important to eat plenty of fruits and vegetables to get that fiber, especially if you have a family history of heart disease or like high cholesterol. Fruits and vegetables are a great way to prevent heart disease and as well as reduce your cholesterol levels. All right. So I got that all scraped out. Like I said, we're going to keep the boats because we're going to use them again. But it's all scraped out there. And another great thing about spaghetti squash is that 1 cup of cooked spaghetti squash is about 9 to 10 grams of carbohydrates. Versus, I got an example here, this is just regular pasta. 1 cup of just regular pasta has about 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrates. So you could eat 3 cups of spaghetti squash and get the same amount of carbohydrates as if you were eating 1 cup of cooked pasta. So you can get way more food in if you eat spaghetti squash if you eat that instead of pasta. All right, so that was a nice tip for if anyone out there has diabetes and is working on their carb counting. All right, so over here, now that our oil is heating up, I am gonna add our meat. So I purchased some ground turkey. So you could do beef, you could do ground bison, which you might get with your commodities food package. So whatever you want to do, just try and go for the leaner varieties of ground meat. So turkey here, it's 93% lean, which is really high. It's really hard to find beef that's 93% lean. Usually what I see is like 80 to 85 in the grocery stores, and so you're gonna have a little more like fat or oil when you cook that, and you can drain that off when you cook beef. Turkey, it's lean, it's so lean that you really don't need to drain it, which is nice, and it's actually cheaper. So when I was at Super One, the beef was going for about $4 to $6 a pound. This turkey was $3.79 a pound, so it's cheap and healthy. Okay, so we have our turkey cooking here. We are going to want to cook this turkey until it's brown. So the safe temperature to cook any turkey or any bird's poultry is 165 degrees. So we want to make sure it's at 165. But we'll know it's cooked because it'll be all brown. If you're doing like bison or beef though, you're going to want to cook that to 160, so just a little bit less. And while this turkey is browning, I have some diced onions. So I diced up a whole onion. We're just going to add that. So we want to cook this turkey and the onions until the onions are translucent. And in addition to the onions, we are also going to add some frozen kale and some garlic. So kale, I got frozen kale. Sometimes getting frozen fruits or vegetables, especially in the wintertime, is a little more cheaper than buying fresh. And kale is a really heart healthy food to eat. Kale is, of all the vegetables, it's pretty much the one that has the most vitamin K. And so vitamin K is a vitamin that helps our blood clot. So if you cut yourself and you're bleeding, the clotting, when your blood clots, that's kind of what stops you from bleeding, right? So you don't bleed out. However, if you are someone who's taking medications such as warfarin or Coumadin, these are blood thinning medications, and so you want to slowly introduce dark leafy vegetables in your diet like kale because of the vitamin K content. Because if you're taking those blood thinning medications and you all of a sudden eat a bunch of kale or a bunch of spinach, really high vitamin K content, it's going to counteract the effects of that medication, right? It's going to make your blood so it clots more when you're taking that medication to make your blood thinner. So just start slow, slowly introduce those dark leafy greens into your diet. And you want to be consistent. So you don't want to one day eat, 5 cups of kale and then the next day eat nothing, or eat no kale or no dark leafy vegetables. So you want to make sure your vitamin K content is consistent from day to day. And you can also work with your doctor to figure out, the right balance for your medication and eating vegetables. Because just because you're on blood thinning medication doesn't mean you can't eat these delicious vegetables. It's just making sure you're consistent and slowly introducing them to your diet. And so garlic is also one of our great nutrients that we're adding, or great food ingredients that we're adding to this meal. And garlic, it has some B vitamins in garlic that help us digest our food, that helps our bodies function. But there have been some studies that have also shown that garlic can help reduce your cholesterol, reduce your blood pressure, and reduce inflammation. So when we experience certain diseases such as heart disease and arthritis and diabetes, our bodies are in a state of inflammation. And so we want to try and reduce the amount of inflammation in our bodies because it causes damage. So eating heart healthy, with garlic and those healthy fats that I talked about, the omega-3 fatty acids, eating stuff like that, and fish, all of those are really heart healthy foods. Fruits and vegetables, all of those are heart healthy foods that are going to help reduce the inflammation in our bodies. So another food ingredient that we are going to be adding to make our pasta sauce are canned tomatoes. So I purchased these no salt added diced tomatoes. You could do crushed tomatoes, and you might get these with your commodities food package. And it's important to try and choose either the no salt added label or the low sodium labeled canned goods. Because food manufacturers add sodium or salt to canned food so that they can stay preserved at room temperature. And so we want to try and limit how much salt and sodium we eat, because eating too much salt or eating too much sodium raises our blood pressure. And when our blood pressure is too high, it puts a lot of strain and stress on our heart. So we want to have a normal blood pressure, and so one way to try and do that is to reduce the amount of salt that we consume through our food. Also a great way to try and reduce blood pressure is to eat more fruits and vegetables, because fruits and vegetables are a good source of potassium. And potassium is one of those electrolytes that helps reduce our blood pressure. So eat more fruits and vegetables, which are naturally low in salt, but also a good source of potassium to help reduce your blood pressure. And I showed in one of my previous videos kind of a comparison between low sodium and no salt added canned foods. And so the no salt added are going to be a little bit lower in sodium than the low sodium labeled canned goods. All right, so this is nice and brown. We got our onions translucent. I'm going to add the kale. And we're just going to cook. So we're cooking this over medium-high heat. And we're just gonna cook the kale and the garlic just till they're heated through, so maybe a couple minutes. So I am going to add 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper. And I'm gonna add 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt to our meat mixture. Which some people might say, hold on, wait a minute, you're adding salt to your food. This is supposed to be a heart-healthy food demo. So most people, about 70% of the salt or sodium in their diet is coming from eating at restaurants, eating takeout, and then eating highly processed foods. So like breads, pizza, crackers, chips, foods that come in packages or canned. Those are going to be high sources of sodium in our diet. And only about 5% of the sodium in our diet is coming from salt that we add while cooking or while at the table. So if you want to work on reducing your sodium content or the sodium that you consume, work on the food that you eat when you're away from home versus the food that you cook, right? If we cook most of our food, we get to control how much salt or sodium we're eating. So that's another great reason why we should cook more of our food at home. And so I just added a little bit of garlic powder. I like to cook with like garlic powder and onion powder as flavors instead of using salt to flavor my food, because I think, you know, the flavors they add are nice, and I'm a big garlic person. So I added fresh garlic and garlic powder to this. It's going to be delicious. But yeah, or, you know, there's always other options like Mrs. Dash. There's quite a few like low sodium or no salt added seasonings that you can use. And so I also have some Italian seasoning here. So I'm going to add about 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning to this. All right, so once we get all of our seasonings mixed in, we're going to add the tomatoes. And we're going to bring the mixture up to a boil so it'll be bubbling. And once we get it up to a boil, we're going to bring it down to a simmer. And it's just going to simmer for about 20 to 30 minutes. And so this recipe, actually, I got inspiration off of the American Heart Association website. So the American Heart Association is sort of the larger organization that kind of puts the Go Red events together, you know. And so they have a lot of really great heart healthy recipes on their website. Okay, so I got our other set of spaghetti squash out of the oven. Our sauce looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat off. And then, so I got all 4 squash boats right here in this pan. And so what we're going to do is we're going to mix all of our spaghetti squash here in this bowl. All that flesh that I scooped out, we're going to mix that with the sauce. Dump that in there. And then once we get it all mixed together, we're going to put it back in the boats, and then we're going to put it back in the oven. It's still at 400 degrees, and we're just going to put the boats back in there when they're all piled up with the filling. We're going to put it in there for about 10 to 15 minutes, just so everything gets heated through, all the flavors have a little bit of time to cook and mix, and then after they cook for about 10 to 15 minutes, it will be ready to serve. All right, so I just pulled our squash here out of the oven. It looks really great. So I'm gonna just scoop one of them out real quick. So like I said, each squash boat has 2 servings. So I'm just gonna try and cut this in half real quick. And then I'm just gonna add a little bit of Parmesan cheese on top. And so the Parmesan cheese, it's one of our really low lactose cheeses that you can eat. So if you have a lactose intolerance, Parmesan cheese is usually a safer cheese to go for. So about 1 ounce of Parmesan cheese has 0 grams of lactose, which is great. If you look at like one of these bags, they're about like 6 ounces, so 1 ounce is like 1/6 of that bag. All right, and so we might not even use the whole thing. So we got our squash boat, half of it there. And then I'm just gonna put a little bit of cheese on top. And voila, this is what we got for our final product. So I'm glad that you guys tuned in, and now I'm happy to take any questions that you may have about this recipe. So thank you.